I'm going to try to find a place that's not offensive to the eye.
Yeah, well, for them, they have to leave. I'm not sure that's the way to start off this presentation. So, hey, has everybody had a good day so far? Yeah? All right, good. So look, we're gonna try not to bore you. As it was announced, I'm from IBM. Natasha's from Herbert Smith Freehills, but we're not actually here to talk about our companies. We're here to talk about a joint venture that we're working on together, a consortium, around using blockchain technology to do something we think is kind of unique and different. This is not going to be a technical speech for those of you who are hoping to get some more tech know-how, building some block code, that type of stuff. Not going to happen here today. We're going to talk more kind of on the outer edges of what blockchain means. But you kind of think it's core, right?
And I think we're going to take it a little bit technical, but maybe not in terms of computer science. We'll take it a little bit technical in respect of the law, which is my kind of tech. So, who are we? We are Herbert Smith Freehills, Kingwood Mallisons, CSIRO, and IBM. IBM is the gorilla in the room because everybody knows who you are, but perhaps it may be that you haven't heard of Herbert Smith Freehills. It's one of the largest global law firms, Kingwood Mallisons same, and CSIRO is the science arm of government in Australia. Now you may ask the question, why on earth would this group of disparate companies come together to work on blockchain technology? And that would be a very good question. And the answer is, let's tell a story. Let's go back to a small girl from Perth. Am I allowed to do this?
No, go ahead. I'm going to just have a seat here. This is a great story, guys. Relax.
So, Perth is a small city in WA, and nothing exciting should come out of Perth, but lots of things exciting come out of Perth, mostly minerals from the ground and big holes in large mining companies. And my personal background is that I have lived with my family and my children and my husband in many countries on Earth, and my husband told me a number of years ago, let's move to Perth. And I went, thank you, darling, that sounds very exciting. Not. But anyway, because I like to follow where my husband leads, we went to Perth. And I am a technology lawyer. So it turned out that at Herbert Smith Freehills, we could do a little bit of technology law. And I had 4 children, so I'd taken some time off. And when I came back to the law, I went, oh, we're still doing the same stuff that we've always been doing. And you wouldn't believe it, we were literally handwriting, updating clauses, but we charge a lot of money for it, so it's pretty cool, right? So then I started reading, and I thought, smart contracting, that's our word. And the computer scientists took it, and we can't actually use smart contracting. And then I started looking about 3 years at this blockchain business, and it kind of seemed a little bit cool and a little bit exciting. So we started talking to the old men at the law firm about blockchain technology. And you know what they thought? This woman is mad, because what could blockchain technology and the law have in common? Blah, 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 blah. Fast forward 3 years. Actually, blockchain and the law have a huge amount in common. And what I got to know by being a blockchain lawyer and a smart legal contract lawyer is that there is an entire part of the community and the economy who are excluded from being able to use these fantastic technologies because they can't necessarily be used legally. And that should really upset you, because nothing upsets the blockchain community more than thinking that large institutions can't use blockchain technology. So, what did we need to do? We needed to find out what we could do with our contracts to make them be able to pull in smart contracting technology. Who in the audience knows what a smart contract is? Yeah, you were all good. So it's just self-executing code, right? Except a contract, and a complex contract, can't actually always be captured by self-executing code. Sometimes it can. And lots of places you will see people say you don't need lawyers anymore because you can just use self-executing code. But I can tell you, if you're a large mining company, or if you are a bank and you've got regulatory obligations, you can't use smart contracting for all the parts of your business that you need to. But you should be able to, because this is really cool tech. And you can actually get huge efficiency gains in your business if you can use this smart contracting technology. So what we did at HSF is we took the smart contracting technology and we embedded it within a traditional legal framework. And that's the work that we're starting to do with IBM. Now, fast forward, come to blockchain and say, okay, if you have, and this is not just a problem in Australia, this is a problem in all areas, in all countries. If you turn your contracts into smart legal contracts, you've just taken a piece of paper and you've given it the ability to speak to external data sources or oracles. You don't have anywhere to necessarily run that new piece of software, because the clients that we were talking to are not going to run contracts like that over large public permissionless blockchains. So that is the backstory, I suppose you would say, to the Australian National Blockchain, is to say, if it is that we want large institutions and the government to be able to, including using their regulatory rights, be able to use this technology, we're going to need to build a new piece of infrastructure to be able to allow them to legally and effectively pick up these new commercial technologies. So, how does that work? We get together with the most awesome company who has done hundreds and hundreds, Paul, you can smile here.
Tens and tens.
Hundreds and hundreds of fantastic enterprise-grade projects. And we get together with CSIRO, who is our science arm of government and very clever and very connected. And we get together with another big, bad law firm, because if we change to smart legal contracts, we can't do that by ourselves. We need to have other law firms who are also prepared to move to this new type of contracting. So I feel like you'll probably be sitting there going, okay, what is this woman actually talking about and why is it interesting? If it is that you are going to do a joint venture project, right now, what you will need to do is you will need to have 2 different sets of records for each of the large corporate institutions who are building that project together. And you will have contract administration that you both take care of separately and independently. So your blockchain brain should be starting to think, hold on, there might actually be a need for a centralized record or authority for that immutable record of those transactions. If you're a large corporate entity, you need to do regulatory reporting. If you're a bank, you need to regulatory report. If you can pick up royalties, you would need to be able to automate some of those features. If you have anti-money laundering obligations, you want to automate some of these features. But if it's commercial grade, there's nowhere that you can actually do that.
So just to kind of capture where the story has taken us, we're starting from the condition that blockchain has done a lot already. And people are looking at blockchain as how to, from a business perspective, how to smooth transaction processing, how to smooth business, how to create efficiency, how to actually build consensus in real time. The challenge is that in business, the binding obligations actually are what binds business together. And so how many people in here believe blockchain creates trust? Right? So I would argue that it digitizes trust versus creating it. Because when you look at business blockchain, I know you, you know me. That's why it's okay for us to exchange data. Now, you may not know Natasha, but because you know me and I know her, we're okay passing that trust along. But that trust, the guardrails of that trust are really the contracts themselves. Or the behavior inside of a company might be the policies and the individual procedures that support those policies. And so if you start looking at this as the backbone, and then you look at what blockchain's trying to do, and I'm sure anybody who's been to an IBM presentation has seen these 2 slides. What does it mean? It's inefficient, it's expensive, it's vulnerable. We can fix all of that with consensus, provenance, and immutability, right? But the truth is even if this works down a supply chain, or even if it works with some piece of banking, or even if it works with insurance, it's still not connected to the underlying contracts. In fact, how many people go out of their way to leave law out of the conversation when you're building your blockchain project? How many people go and grab the lawyers first thing you do? Say, okay, we're going to do a workshop. We're going to do a design thinking workshop. We're really going to go out and we're going to define the next way we do it. And then we better go get the lawyers. Let's get them in the room right away.
And the regulators.
Oh, and the regulators.
Go get the lawyers and the regulators. Bring them first, because we're not going to do a drop of tech until we get those guys in the room. They really they're forward thinkers. Get them in the room.
Yeah. So let's see a show of hands. How many people go get the lawyers first? Oh, wow. You're a good man. And just so you know, I can say this because we're friends now, another old guy in the room, right? So just saying, we've gotten kicked so many times that your project gets killed if the lawyers aren't involved.
Can I just stop you there, Paul? But the thing is, right, I've lived in the Middle East, and this is the story that I like to tell that's the metaphor for not getting these people involved. Is that when I lived in the Middle East, and if anyone else here, you will understand my point, is you would have a sheikh, and a sheikh would say, build me a tower that looks like a perfume bottle, and build it here, and build it, and I want it built in the next 2 weeks. And then all the engineers would come afterwards, and all the policy people and the planners would go, okay, you don't actually have the wiring, you don't actually have the roadworks that you need to build that tower there, but he wants it, so build it there. And this is the same thing that you have with your blockchain projects, is you can do that, but whatever you do, you're going to have to go back and paper it up with the law afterwards, and it's really messy and it's not fit for purpose.
And that is kind of how we're approaching it today. And in fact, because of that, let's just take a simple supply chain solution. We get great results from a supply chain solution, but we ignore the fact that Party A and Party B have a contract, Party B and Party C have a contract, C and D have a contract, and I might have my relationship just with the shipper, Party B, and the buyer, Party F. And all these other contracts in between are modeled independently of the fact that there are actual contracts to support it. And so, Natasha, why isn't blockchain working? We already talked about having to underpin it, but there's more to it than that.
There's a couple of reasons, and the first is what I had talked to you about, is if there's certain parts of the community that are excluded from using some of these public permissionless ledgers because they have listing obligations, because they're public listed institutions, or because they're government. So the response traditionally has been, if you fall into that camp, and you say traditionally, really we're talking about 3 years, is that you then go and you build yourself your own private blockchain, which is suited to your own particular purpose. But what I found from working with companies along this aspect is that that is actually really hard work. And the human cost of actually going to build your own private blockchain around your own solution, around your own particular industry use case, you have to have a really good ROI to do that. And that's not how real life works as well, because you may have if you're a large, so I'm coming from the mindset you're a large corporate institution, you don't have one use case. You might have 17 places that you need to automate. So if you just automate your supply chain process, what about your HR process back here? What about the fact that you want to automate your AML KYC component? So watching all of this happen, the real human condition being that people would use all their energy in a company to build this one project, and then would be what's called C-suite fatigue. They've had enough. They've done their project. It kind of works, and it kind of has done one thing. But do you notice that there's no permanent solution? And what we kind of stumbled along the way is if you took the smart contracting and you embed it in a smart legal contract, and all business is done by contracts anyway. You already pay and people do business by contracts. How about you use that contract to lay down the digital line and the digital ID between these corporate participants in a network? And once the digital line is laid down, why would you pick it up again? Because this is all about efficiency, right? And what we do in blockchain community is we have effectively built hundreds of internets. And now we have all these problems with interoperability. We do all these work. We're all very clever and doing these projects. But what's the next step? How do we, when we do the projects, how do we connect them? And how do we make them all able to generate network effects across economies as a whole? And that is what we're trying to solve here. So the smart legal contract is the way to lay down that line. Tell us a little bit, Paul, about how the smart legal contract can codify clauses to give us that workload and to give us that automated capacity.
Yes, this is the A&B infomercial. Thank you for joining us.
That was my Siri voice. I am actually automated. Paul, would you like to know more?
No. Yes, yes, I would. So look. At the end of the day, you guys, it's the stuff in teal, and there's a reason. You know.
Can't use teal.
Huh?
I don't know if anyone uses
Is that
the
not
word
teal? What color is that? What color? No, not the green. The one on the other side. Teal.
I don't think the color is teal, but I feel like it's weird for you to use the word teal.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. So the stuff in teal, and there's a reason why there's more things in teal. That's the law, and I'm on the stage with a lawyer. Therefore, there has to be more law than technology. And then there's the green stuff on the other side, and that's all of our little blockchain projects that we're running, and for that matter, non-blockchain projects that are actually out there executing. The problem is that blue spot in the middle, and it's not IBM blue on purpose, guys. It just happened that way. But the blue spot in the middle is really where the technology and the legal contract converge. And that's really the first thing we're trying to build here. And it's one thing to say, okay, I know the contract, I can do some design thinking workshops, I can get the lawyers in, I can then build it from scratch. But what happens if the contract changes? What happens if there's an amendment? What happens if I have two contracts and they're slightly different? And what we do in blockchain projects, and for that matter, almost all of our business projects, is we actually move away from the details of the contract to kind of generalize our technical solution and meet business requirements, but we really don't tie them to the underlying contracts, which are the ultimate source of business requirements, actually.
And I think if I was sitting in your place, there would be a group of you, and you can feel free not to put up your hands because I won't make you do this, who would say, oh yeah, this is the corporate play. They're doing something a bit schmoozy here to make money off our beautiful blockchain. But actually, I can say this with good authority because I'm close to the people who are working on this project. This is not an attempt to build an IBM blockchain. This is not an attempt to create the HSF power platform. This is an attempt to actually bring together a group of people to make, the same way that people came together and tried to standardize the internet, to try to standardize a product so that all parts of the community are able to use the blockchain.
In fact, it's going to be a marketplace. At the end of the day, what we're trying to build is a core structure that allows us to tie code to the contract, and as policies and procedures changes, as law changes, to have it automatically trigger and notify people that parts of your code are now suspect to not being legally binding any longer. It's also a means of actually accelerating blockchain projects. And last but not least, it's a place where other blockchain solutions can plug in. Because if I think about, and supply chain is the easiest one to think about because everybody's kind of accepted that it's a good use case. But if you take supply chain and you look at what we're trying to solve around visibility of my in-flight inventory, do I have any inefficiencies in getting something in through a port? And what's holding me up? All that use case is still very valid. The only thing is that there's individual contracts that outline the behavior between parties. And so what we're looking to do here is to create an infrastructure that allows these other blockchain projects, and for that matter, create an accelerator that actually ties blockchain development to legal infrastructure. And in fact, allows us to start influencing the way law writes contracts, such that it actually becomes ability to translate it into code.
So if you've got a groovy blockchain project that you're working on, God bless you, because I know how hard that is to get started, and well done and keep going. This is not meant to displace that project. What this is meant to do is to give you a big network. It means that when you put that thing together, you've got somewhere to plug it into that gives you access to a whole ton of other network participants. The reason that it's the Australian national blockchain and not another country, the reason that there can't be one blockchain is, again, because you've now got the lawyers in the room, best of law working with best of tech, and I can tell you, if these products are computer software, they are also having requirements under the law, under cybersecurity and privacy law. So if you do not bind your blockchain project, in this respect, a large project like this, to a piece of law, or to a country, you're starting to run into troubles as to which jurisdiction actually legislates for you. So when you hear about the Australian National Blockchain, that doesn't mean that data stops at the border. It just means when you get on the A and B, the cybersecurity rules that will apply to you are those that are born in Australia. When you get on the A and B, you are now regulated by Australian regulators. That doesn't mean you can't take data. It doesn't mean only Australian national companies can be involved.
Now, there's another reason why we're focusing on Australia to begin with. One is because we met the lawyers in Australia, and they have the connections. The CSRO is in Australia. But the other part of it is a lot of the law that we're trying to capture is jurisdictional to the countries. And so the A and B is not an attempt to box out our more magnanimous and intelligent cousins here in New Zealand across the Tasman, but it is designed as a starting place. And as this starting place, and because it's going to be a marketplace, and because we're going to create it in a way that people can contribute, the ability to lift this and move it to other jurisdictions is part of our key effort. And what better place to start than New Zealand because of the close kindred between the two countries. But what I can tell you is there's incredible interest in Europe, incredible interest in Asia, and so there's a unique place here. The only other thing I would note that you kind of pulled out, Natasha, and I want to make sure it lands, is that this is not a blocker to building blockchain. This is meant to be an accelerator. And you might say, well, how so? Well, we did an entire session.
Is that our timer already?
No. We got 9 minutes and 8 seconds.
Oh, God, okay, sorry.
There
Quick,
you go. You can look
talk
right there.
fast.
Yes, talk
Automate
fast.
yourself.
When you think about blockchain solutions, especially ones that cut across companies and cut down supply chains or cut across trade finance or look at a lot of co-opetition, I would contend that adoption is one of the biggest issues to create value. I mean, has anybody got a POC that's gone from POC to pilot and now you're in production? Anybody? Okay, got one down here in front. Anybody else? Anybody in just pilot and you're trying to figure out how to scale it? There's a couple there, right? All right. What we found at IBM, having done a few of these and having a few in production, is that it's not good enough just to have the 3, 4, or 5 parties that are involved. You need to get the entire network involved. And part of what we're trying to create here is a foundational rail around contracts where people can get value one-on-one. So all I really need is to put my contracts on. And once my contract's on, I can actually notify my counterparties and say, hey, I put the contracts on. Can you load yours? And then we can use cognitive, natural language, compare and comply, and actually determine, are we actually operating on the same versions of the contract? And you might say, people are always operating on the same versions. We signed it. But the truth is half the time you get into a dispute is because people think they're operating on different amendments or different versions of the contract. Beyond that, there's all this contract administration that you can do over and above an Ariba or a Cooper or another contract management system or a procurement system. And so what you do is you create this opportunity for companies to come on and get instantaneous value. Now, I've heard arguments that this is not really blockchain, you don't need it for that. And I agree, actually. You don't need it for the initial use case. It's the future use cases is what you need it for. And so by building it here and creating the structure, you get people on board. And by getting people on board, you can lay your food safety or your blockchain to make sure that honey is leaving the country here, is showing up in New York and still has the same components, because all of the parties have now engaged because they're getting value in another way, and it becomes very easy to get them involved. But it's not just about law.
This is the other part where I want to give you some comfort about the people that are involved in trying to create this new digital ecosystem for Australia. And that's the governance model. And it's my favourite part of the project, and the reason that I'm personally involved is because there's a crypto punk in me too. So it likes the idea of saying, I respond to something, and everybody in this room is in a blockchain conference because you're actually responding to something here about blockchain technology. And some of us don't even know what we're responding to. And a part of that might be this democratization function. And we know that we've democratized knowledge through the information. We like democratized governments. What about if we, as a long-run vision, effectively digitizing our economy and connecting by digital tissue between all large organizations and eventually people, that's a very serious piece of infrastructure. And that's one that you do not want a centralized authority to look after. You do not want a government in charge of it. You do not want a private singular institution in charge of it. So who would you want to have in charge of it? And I'd like to think that the people in this room would say, well, we'd like to have a distributed group of people in charge of something that serious, because you've all watched sci-fi movies and we know where something like this can end up. Seriously. The A and B model is that the actual governance in terms of key decision making is to be made by done by a constitution and done by a group of institutions, and that's those distributed network participants, trusted institutions, so a belt and braces of trust. And that's to get together a council of people, charities, banks, don't laugh with me here, you actually do trust them, even though you don't trust them, regulators, and large corporate entities, and not to bind them by a consensus protocol, which is proof of work or proof of stake or anything that uses lots of electricity, but to actually bind them by a contract where they have to promise to do the work of consensus properly, not look behind the hood. And those guys are then embedded into doing that work properly because they now have obligations to each other. And they have obligations that are legally binding that they can be sued for if they do not do the work of consensus properly.
And that kind of brings it to my favorite part, which is this concept of a digital counterparty. So one of the big challenges I've had for a while with business blockchain is this concept that consensus occurs between two trusted individuals. And what are the guardrails for that? And we shape the guardrails as the business requirements themselves, and then lawyers come in behind and kind of try to underpin that whole piece. The contract already exists. And so if you can actually tie the contract to the behavior, what you end up with is this, in essence, a digital third party to all the transactions. And so you and I might trust each other. And we might trust each other three ways because we have three different contracts for three different versions of behavior. It doesn't mean I trust you for the 4 different ways I trust Natasha. And so the contract...
I thought that was 24 different ways you trust Natasha.
It goes up and down. It just depends on the day. But my point is that the contract is not a static document that simply says this is how we've agreed to do business together. But by digitizing it and by codifying the key elements of it, you can actually make it be a digital third party and actually enhance the consensus process. And so permissioning and onboarding isn't just about somebody coming and joining and signing a contract with that, but it's the fact that they actually have other counterparties on the system. And to some extent, it actually creates this broader view. So we got 2 minutes left, Natasha, so I'm going to flick it forward and talk about where we're at. Mm-hmm. So guys, HSF's been working on this for quite a long time, way before we got involved. You guys have been doing smart legal contracts for a long time. Data 61 and CSRO have been looking at all kinds of enhancements around AI and around natural language reading. IBM has been very involved in blockchain for quite a while, have some successful projects, have some failures. We're well aware of them. And KWM has actually been working a great deal on the regulatory front, not just in the US, but kind of globally.
Yep.
And so if you combine these parties together, we've all been working on it, but for about the last, year and a half, or year, let's call it, we've started coming together, and last month we declared that we're going to form a consortium to build this. And we've now started bringing our IP together. We've started to engage in the build process. We've actually started going out to the marketplace to gain individuals who want to participate in this early on. And some of them are the are the ones, and I actually don't disagree with you at all about banks, but the truth is that they are involved in almost every transaction that occurs. And so would you rather have the devil you know inside your tent or outside your tent? And there's a debate for another day. We can have it afterwards, maybe over a drink. But at the end of the day, they do play a role, and they play an important role in what happens in our economy, and also the large corporates that are doing a lot of the transactional processing. Our intent is to have this first layer of capability up and running with people on it, before the middle of next year, and actually be in a pilot state. I will tell you, based on the people that have shown interest, we can't build this fast enough, which is why we're going to actively seek a broader community to participate in it. And then when you look at July to December, we're talking about going into full production. And so from there, I'll let you talk about how do people get involved.
Hey,
you got 15 seconds.
Hey, New Zealand. So we can't build this for you yet, but you have the same legal problems that we do when it comes to certain parts of your economy being able to use these awesome new technologies. So the appetite that we have, I'm going to say, is the same appetite that you will have in terms of blockchain and smart contracting adoption. So if it is that along this journey and over the next year, we are able to assist by putting together the same functionality in New Zealand, we'd like to hear from you. And we also believe that this model that we've come up with has some good governance structures and some serious people who are working on standards which can help in doing something similar, because as we've said, trade doesn't stop at borders. So if we can end up with a world which have sensible governance procedures in every nation, then we can connect those blockchains and have a true global solution.
So thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.